Hello and welcome to today's webinar from Baking and Snack, Milling and Baking News and Food Business News titled The Gluten-Free Market Opportunity is Large, Growing Rapidly, and Here to Stay. This webinar is sponsored by Watson, Inc. I'm Lucy Sutton, Managing Editor for Baking and Snack, and I have a few housekeeping items for you before we move into the heart of the program. First off, this event will be archived and should be available in a week or less on our websites, bakingbusiness.com and foodbusinessnews.net. Second, we encourage your questions. Our speakers will address as many questions as they can following the presentation. Please type them into the box provided at the bottom of the console and hit the submit button as you think of questions. If at any time you have issues with your audio stream or advancing of the slides, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your console. For help at any time, access the link provided at the bottom of the slide in front of you. Now I'll hand things over to Lori Gorton, Executive Editor for Baking and Snack, to introduce our topic and speakers. Lori?
Today we will examine the following questions to help in the evaluation of this business opportunity. What is the true size of the gluten-free market? Who is eating gluten-free, and how much of the market is due to fad dieting versus a medical need? Is there a demand that is not currently being met? What is the need? Can it be done? Can the need be met? What technology is available to allow a competitive edge? What would the potential profit models look like? What are the latest developments in the gluten-free market? Can you put together all the resources needed to pull it off before the window of opportunity closes? What are the growth expectations for this market? To answer these questions, we have some great speakers lined up today. Shelley Case is a registered dietitian and a leading international expert on celiac disease and the gluten-free diet. She is a member of the medical advisory boards of the Celiac Disease Foundation, Gluten Intolerance Group, and Canadian Celiac Association, as well as the scientific advisory board of the Grain Foods Foundation. Her national bestseller, Gluten-Free Diet, a comprehensive resource guide, is highly recommended by health professionals, celiac organizations, consumers, the food industry, and media. Charles Erlinger is a research and development project manager in the Bakery Ingredients Division of Watson, Inc. Charles joined Watson after more than 25 years in the field, starting with Arnold Foods and most recently with Weston and Grupo Bimbo as Senior Technical Service Specialist. Most recently, he has been involved in the development of Watson's Gluten line of gluten-free mixes. Don Sosik has more than 25 years of experience in the food and beverage industry. He has worked for the Weight Watchers Food Company division of Heinz, Heinz Bakery, Cadbury Schweppes, and Watson, Inc. in various quality positions. He has been the Quality Assurance Manager at Watson for 2.5 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in biology from CCSU. After each speaker's presentation, Moira Watson, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Watson, will share market data and projections on the gluten-free market that the company has compiled from a variety of respected sources. I'll be back during the Q&A session after the presentations. Take it away, Shelley.
Thank you very much, Lori. In order to understand the gluten-free market, we need to find out who is actually the gluten-free consumer. There are many different groups of people that are following a gluten-free diet. Those with the medical conditions celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. But there are others who are following a gluten-free diet, and it's been embraced by a very diverse group of consumers, such as those with autism, attention deficit disorder, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, and irritable bowel syndrome. In addition, many celebrities and athletes have jumped on the gluten-free diet bandwagon. So right now, gluten has become enemy number one. It's important to differentiate those consumers who are on the gluten-free diet out of a proven medical necessity and those that are following the gluten-free diet because it's the latest fad. I want to take a few moments now to talk about celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Celiac disease is an inherited autoimmune disorder in which the proteins from the grains wheat, rye, and barley, collectively called gluten, damage the small intestine. Now, when we have an autoimmune disease, this occurs when the body actually starts attacking itself and goes after normal tissues. So in the case of celiac disease, the immune system abnormally reacts when gluten is consumed, and it leads to a wide variety of symptoms depending on which organs in the body are attacked. The initiating reaction begins in the gastrointestinal tract, where gluten damages the tiny finger-like projections called villi in the small intestine. These villi eventually become inflamed and flattened, which is called villous atrophy. As a result, the intestine is unable to properly absorb a variety of nutrients such as iron, calcium, folic acid, and vitamin D. Now, celiac disease, as I mentioned, not only affects the gastrointestinal tract, but it can affect many other organ systems, causing a wide range of symptoms that vary greatly from person to person, which is why it's so difficult to diagnose. And even though 1 in 100 people have the disease, it's estimated that only about 5 to 10% are actually diagnosed. And what's interesting is that the average length of time for diagnosis here in North America, based on a study that we did here in Canada and one that was done by Columbia University in New York, found the delay in diagnosis range between 10 and 12 years for adults and 1 year for children. And many of these people have been misdiagnosed with conditions such as irritable bowel, allergies, ulcers, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, or they're told it's all in their head. Now, if someone continues to eat gluten, it can result in a variety of health conditions, and it can lead to early bone disease such as osteopenia or full-blown osteoporosis. We can see infertility in both men and women, as well as a lot of other health problems related to not absorbing those vitamins and minerals, and the most common one is iron deficiency anemia. In addition, someone with undiagnosed, untreated celiac disease has a greater risk for developing other autoimmune diseases such as autoimmune thyroid disease and autoimmune liver disease. And finally, if they have gone for many, many years on gluten and not been diagnosed and treated, there is an increased risk of gastrointestinal cancers, especially lymphoma. Now, there are a number of associated conditions in which celiac disease occurs more frequently. These include other autoimmune diseases, and the most commonly associated disease is type 1 diabetes. And we see when people with type 1 diabetes are screened for celiac disease, studies show anywhere from 2 to 16% of people with type 1 diabetes developing celiac disease. We also find celiac disease more commonly in both hyper and hypothyroid disease, autoimmune liver disease, Sjogren's syndrome, arthritis, and a kidney disease called IgA nephropathy. In addition, there are some genetic disorders where there's an increased risk for celiac disease in Down syndrome and Turner syndrome, as well as individuals that have an IgA deficiency. In addition, first-degree relatives of those with known celiac disease are also at a higher risk for developing celiac disease, and this is why we recommend that all first-degree relatives be screened for celiac disease, regardless of whether they've got symptoms or not. Through increased awareness and better diagnostic tools, we are seeing more people being diagnosed with celiac disease. However, there's some interesting research showing that the prevalence of celiac disease is actually increasing. A Mayo Clinic study done by Dr. Joe Murray, published in Gastroenterology in 2009, found that the rate of celiac disease has actually quadrupled in the past 50 years. Another study by international celiac experts Dr. Alessio Fasano and Carlo Catassi from the Center for Celiac Research in Baltimore, published in the Internal Medicine, Annals of Internal Medicine in September of 2010, reported that celiac disease has increased 5-fold over the past 30 years, doubling every 15 years. Their study also found something very interesting, and that was that the incidence of celiac disease actually increased as individuals aged, with a significant number of the patients losing their tolerance to gluten in their 50s and 60s. So that dispels the myth that people develop this disease only as a young child once they're first exposed to gluten. So we see that people can be eating gluten for many, many years and then suddenly lose their tolerance. A Finnish study also found that the prevalence of celiac disease in the elderly was 2.45% compared to 1% in the general population. And when Dr. Fasano has been asked what is causing this increased prevalence of celiac disease, he has stated that there's some environmental factors, and he believes changes in the composition of bacteria in the gut may be causing individuals to lose their tolerance to gluten. So he's currently doing a lot of research in the whole area of gut immunity. So the only treatment right now for celiac disease is a strict lifelong gluten-free diet, although there are some interesting novel treatments being explored, and one that seems to be quite promising right now is using endopeptidase enzymes that can break down the gluten into non-immunogenic peptide fragments. They're also looking at a celiac vaccine and seeing if they can change the wheat to remove the toxic gliadin fraction. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done, so for the time being, it is the gluten-free diet. And because it's so very complex and challenging to follow, it's essential that individuals on the gluten-free diet consult with a dietitian with expertise in the celiac disease and the gluten-free diet for individualized nutrition assessment, disease and diet education, as well as practical management strategies to adapt to the new gluten-free lifestyle. Now, I'd like to just briefly discuss non-celiac gluten sensitivity. We are now learning that it's actually possible to be intolerant to gluten and not have celiac disease. Unfortunately, there's been very little research in this area until recently. And world-renowned celiac researcher, as I mentioned before, Dr. Alessio Fasano, has identified key pathogenic differences between celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. He has found that there are differences in the gut permeability and the mucosal immune gene expression in these two conditions. And there are other researchers who are also investigating gluten sensitivity and its various presentations. So there are some things that we seem to know now about gluten sensitivity. It appears not to be an autoimmune condition or an allergy, yet symptoms are often very similar to celiac disease. Also, the consumption of gluten doesn't cause an increased intestinal permeability or severe intestinal damage or the result of developing other autoimmune disorders. And the only way that we can make a diagnosis of gluten sensitivity right now is to rule out celiac disease and wheat allergy and see the response to the gluten-free diet and a gluten challenge. But again, the only treatment we have for celiac disease and gluten sensitivity is a gluten-free diet. And here's just some data from Dr. Fasano's center between 2004 and 2010 at the Center for Celiac Research, and they found that about 6% of the patients that they saw fulfilled the criteria for gluten sensitivity. And you can see there's a wide variety of symptoms, and many of these overlap with celiac disease. So, based on 1% of the population having celiac disease and the estimated 6% with gluten sensitivity, this translates into 21 million Americans who will need to follow a gluten-free diet due to medical necessity. And for my fellow Canadians who are on the webinar today, prevalence rates of celiac disease and gluten sensitivity are thought to be similar, which would translate to about 2 million Canadians needing a gluten-free diet. So now I'd like to focus our attention on the gluten-free diet. When we talk about gluten, we're referring to a general name for specific storage proteins called prolamins found in the grains wheat, rye, and barley. And the toxic fractions include the gliadin in wheat, cecolin in rye, and the hordein in barley. Although corn and rice are sometimes, corn is sometimes referred to as corn gluten and rice prolamins, these are not toxic, and I will briefly touch on the protein found in oats called avenin. Before I do that, I just want to remind people about the many foods and ingredients that have to be avoided on a gluten-free diet. And this includes all types of wheat, including the ancient varieties that are in gold there in einkorn, emmer, farro, kamut, and spelt, as well as all barley-based ingredients, barley malt extract, and barley malt flavoring, regular commercial oats on the market, rye, and all forms of wheat. Now, the reason why the gluten-free diet is very complex and can be difficult to follow is because gluten is found in so many foods, some beverages and medications, and even some supplements. And just put up a few examples here. Corn and rice cereals, the traditional cornflakes and Rice Krispies have a barley malt flavoring in it, although Kellogg's has introduced a new gluten-free Rice Krispie that does not have the barley malt flavoring in it. A number of sauces and soy sauces, salad dressings, marinades, seasonings, specially prepared mustards. The list goes on, and you can just see the wide number of products where gluten can be found. We also see it in processed meats, meat substitutes, vegetarian burgers, and textured vegetable protein, self-basting poultry, imitation seafood, canned baked beans, dry roasted or flavored nuts, your seasoned rice mixes and rice pilafs, along with a lot of your seasoned snack foods that may use wheat starch or wheat flour in the seasoning blend to plate the spices and herbs onto it. Some chocolate bars and chocolates may contain barley malt flavoring or wheat flour or wheat starch. Some of the flavored herbal teas and coffee substitutes, as well as regular beer, ale, and lager, and even communion wafers. So this is why it is such a challenging diet to follow. Now, I just want to briefly touch on oats. For years, we thought that oats had the same toxic protein as the wheat, rye, and barley. The early studies that were done, unfortunately, were very small in size, with only done in children and less than 3 months. And one of the problems with these studies is that they did not test the oats for purity, which is critical because oats are frequently contaminated with wheat, rye, and barley. Now, just to give you an idea of how contaminated they are, here was a study looking at European, Canadian, and American oats using the Sandwich R5 ELISA, which is very sensitive to detect down to 5 parts, can quantify at 5 parts per million gluten. And you can see here that, well, almost 60% of the oats were extremely contaminated, over 200 parts per million. A very recent study just done by Health Canada scientists looked at 133 oat samples, and they found that only 3 out of the 133 had no detectable gluten, and 2 out of those 3 samples were the ones that were labeled wheat-free and deemed pure of gluten, and that's why they were called pure oats. But you can see that all the other oats were very contaminated, and it didn't matter whether it was regular or organic, and it also did not matter what format of the oats. You can see the range and the median and the mean for the contamination levels in parts per million. Keeping in mind, we are trying to keep under 20 parts per million for the threshold level for gluten, which appears to be, based on the research, the level that seems to be tolerated by the majority of people with celiac. Now, Health Canada did a very systematic review of all the most recent literature on the safety of oats between 1995 and 2008. And I don't have time to go into that today, but just to say that their conclusion based on these studies found that the majority of individuals with celiac disease could tolerate pure, uncontaminated oats. Now, there were a very small number of individuals that did not tolerate these pure, uncontaminated oats, and it's unknown at this time what the mechanism is that's triggering this intolerance. So that is why we recommend that individuals should be well controlled on their gluten-free diet and their celiac disease, and then they can introduce oats, and that's usually at around 6 months to a year. Now, as a result of these research studies, they are revealing that pure uncontaminated oats are safe. There have been a number of companies starting in Canada and several U.S. now that are producing pure uncontaminated oats. So if you'd like to read more about the safety of oats and get more detailed information about this, including the Health Canada report, you can go to my website, which is www.glutenfreediet.ca, and that's all one word, glutenfreediet.ca, and when you click on Gluten-Free Diet on the left-hand icon, you can find all of the information on the oats that are available there. And why we are excited about pure uncontaminated oats is it's a welcome addition to the gluten-free diet, as oats are a good source of dietary fiber, especially the soluble fiber, as well as other vitamins and minerals and protein. Now, in addition to oats, there are many other gluten-free grains, seeds, starches, and flours, as well as legumes that can be incorporated into the gluten-free diet, into gluten-free products and gluten-free menu plans. And I don't have time to discuss them all, but just to give you a sense of the array of options that we have, everything ranging from arrowroot, amaranth, buckwheat, corn, flax, Indian rice grass, all of your legume or pulse flours. Your mesquites can be made into a flour, millet, your nut flours, quinoa, potato starch and potato flour, rice, rice bran, sorghum, soy, sweet potato, tapioca, and teff are some of the choices. One of the problems, though, historically, the gluten-free products have been made with the staples white rice flour, corn, potato, and tapioca starch. But as you can see here in this chart that I put together, comparing 1 cup of gluten-containing enriched white flour and whole wheat flour to the standard gluten-free flours and starches, you can see the poor nutritional composition of these gluten-free alternatives that are so widely used in many gluten-free products that are on the market today. Now, fortunately, we are starting to see some companies using a variety of the healthier gluten-free grains and flours and seeds in gluten-free products that not only give us that better nutritional profile, but a better texture and flavor. So here's another example of 1 cup of comparing the garbanzo bean and a yellow pea flour to the staple gluten-free flours and starches, and you can see that they are much superior in nutrition for protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. So for many people on a gluten-free diet, getting enough fiber is often a big challenge because, as I mentioned, most of the gluten-free baked products and cereals and pastas are made with those refined flours and starches. So as you can see on the chart, I'm going to go from the lowest to the highest. The fiber content, if we switch over to brown rice or quinoa flour, we do get some more fiber. And then as you see on this chart, all the choices that the fiber content increases dramatically. So incorporate one of the things that I want to encourage manufacturers, and we certainly promote this to our clients, is that it's important to focus on many key nutrients, especially iron, B vitamins, calcium, and vitamin D, because these are some of the nutrients that we have found to be an issue. And that's why we encourage people eating a variety of foods to make sure they get those nutrients. And incorporating those more nutritious gluten-free grains, flours, and seeds into gluten-free products and the gluten-free meal plan, along with choosing enriched gluten-free products, can greatly improve the nutritional status of individuals following a gluten-free diet. So it's interesting to review the ingredient list of the gluten-free products that are on the market today and see how many products are not enriched with iron and B vitamins. But the Food and Drug laws in both the U.S. and Canada, the regulations do allow for the enrichment of gluten-free foods. So I encourage people that are from the food companies today to seriously consider enriching their products and incorporating some of the healthier gluten-free grains, flours, and seeds into their products, because we have too many products that are low, that are high in starches, sugar, fats, and are very low in iron and B vitamins and dietary fiber. So in conclusion, if you would like some more information about celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, and the gluten-free diet, I invite you to go to my website, which is at glutenfreediet.ca, because we had just a short amount of time today to give you a crash course on these conditions and the diet. You can also sign up for my free monthly newsletter where I share the latest developments, research articles, links to helpful resources, and other information about celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, and the gluten-free diet. I'll now turn the next part of our webinar over to Moira.
Thanks, Shelley. That was great information. And as an added bonus, your market size data gives me a great segue into answering our first question. What is the true size of the gluten-free market? There's no real easy answer, but I'll take you through our thought process and show you the conclusions that we came to. The problem is we often go to sales figures for market size estimates. But in the case of the gluten-free sales figures, they're muddied by a vast number of products that were relaunched as gluten-free, many of which never contained gluten in the first place. Furthermore, not everyone buying gluten-free products really needs to be on gluten-free diets. That being said, it's still an important question and one we have to answer. Investment is required for companies that want to enter into this market, and of course we need to make sure that the market can provide a significant return on that investment. Packaged Facts, in their report on gluten-free foods and beverages, estimates that the size of the gluten-free market was around $2.6 billion at the end of 2010. There are a lot of estimates out there, but I like to use theirs because they only include sales on products that could have contained gluten and were clearly marked as gluten-free. But looking at current sales in a category may not be a true indicator of the potential size for that category if the sales were dampened by poor product quality. I believe this is the case for many of the gluten-free products. Actually, anyone who's tried some of the gluten-free products on the market today can probably tell you that poor product quality may have negatively impacted their sales. Another way of looking at the size of the market is the number of consumers in that target group. But as I said earlier, you don't want to look at all the gluten-free shoppers as your target group because many of them really don't need to be on a gluten-free diet and they won't be doing it long term. We took a very conservative approach. We looked at only those consumers we feel have a real staying power, not the fad dieting segment of the market, but only those with a true medical need for gluten-free products. These are the people who will be on a gluten-free diet for the rest of their lives. An estimated 18 million people in the United States are sensitive to gluten. Another 3 million plus Americans are thought to have celiac disease. Together, that equals 21 million people in the United States. But what does that mean as far as potential consumption? Consider for a minute that the domestic per capita wheat flour use is estimated at 134 pounds. Using a conservative number like 130 pounds of flour per person, this would equate to about 2.7 billion pounds of flour a year for that 21 million people. That's a lot of wheat-based foods that are not being consumed by this group, and their numbers are growing every year. This is a big opportunity to sell them gluten-free reformulations for those traditional wheat-based foods. But really, it might be more accurate to think of the gluten-free market as 21 million households versus people. You can estimate something like 2.6 people per household based on census figures to get a feeling of the potential market size. Now, let me tell you why I suggest thinking of households. In many cases, the entire family is eating gluten-free in support of one family member. There are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, it's hard on a child or an adult when other people eat gluten around them. Children talk about how hard it is when other students have brought cupcakes into school and they have to watch their friends eat them. It's hard enough on these kids to see their friends eat gluten, much less their own siblings. In the same way, it's often trying on adults when they can't eat sandwiches at a business lunch or foods at a party. It's bad enough when people have to eat different foods outside the home. Their home should be a place where they don't feel constantly deprived and where they can eat almost anything in the house. Second, it greatly reduces cross-contamination issues in the kitchen. Think of what it would be like to keep separate food prep areas in your kitchen and separate appliances like toasters. You can see the problem. Plus, it's enough to cook one meal every night. Most people really don't want to cook two separate meals every night. Yet another reason is that family members often feel that it is important for them to experience what their loved ones are going through, so they can be as supportive and helpful as possible. Families who keep a gluten-free household are very motivated to cook great gluten-free foods because they know how it feels to see others eating pizza and want some that's gluten-free and just as good. This motivation keeps families constantly searching for new and better products. That search for better products brings me to my next section of slides, the demand that is not being met in the market today and what exactly the needs are. One of the needs is better nutrition. Enrichment and fortification are smart marketing under almost any circumstances, but for gluten-free, it's a more critical issue. As Shelley illustrated, gluten-free diets often lack essential nutrients and fiber. Furthermore, celiac disease damages the small intestine and interferes with the absorption of nutrients from food. Boosting the nutritional value of their gluten-free foods, including dietary fiber content, is something all food processors should strongly consider. There is a definite need here. There is also a demand for better quality, shelf-stable products that are available in mainstream markets. Since we started researching the gluten-free market this past February, I've been reading many blogs and news stories about celiac disease and the gluten-free diet. You can gain a lot of insight from reading these blogs, and I strongly suggest anyone interested in the market start reading them. I have a list of some of the ones I follow on our website. We'll be giving you an address for that webpage at the end of the presentation, so you can take a look for yourself and see what they're saying. Most gluten-free shoppers tell a similar story. They search the stores and the internet for gluten-free bread. They've spent a lot of money trying various breads only to find them unpalatable, and that's saying it nicely. They report trying to make their own breads with disappointing results, but for many, making their own bread is the better option as far as taste is concerned. I have to think this is a last resort because when you compare the rate of home baking to that of the general population, as we all know, most households do not bake their own bread. There were bakers in ancient Egypt for a reason. For quite some time now, most people have not wanted to bake their own bread on a daily or a weekly basis. They would rather buy it. Many surveys and focus groups support this observation. Overwhelmingly, the request is for bread with better taste and texture. In one of the blogs I read, a woman reported finding a bread she loved. It was $16 a loaf, yet she said it was well worth it. Charlie will be talking more about the taste and texture issues associated with gluten-free products in a moment. But let me leave you with this. There is a strong demand for good-tasting bread that the whole family can enjoy, and there are similar needs not being met in many other product categories of the gluten-free market, such as tortillas, soft-baked bars, and pizzas. The key is to identify areas where options are limited by quality or availability, enter the market with a superior product, and gain first-mover advantage. So with that, Charlie, I'm going to pass it to you for our next topic.
Thank you, Moira. We have found gluten-free products are often weak and crumbly in regards to grain structure. The volume of gluten-free breads is usually small and not very attractive when compared to whole wheat breads. The grain of the yeast-raised gluten-free products appear dense and uneven. They tend to have poor eating qualities when it comes to flavor, aroma, and mouthfeel. Gluten-free products usually have a very high water content, thus leading to high mold activity and reduced shelf life. I have seen gluten-free products packed in modified atmospheric wrappers, leading to expensive packaging costs. Many gluten-free products are low in vitamins, minerals, and fibers when compared to similar wheat products. Many of the gluten-free products that are available for consumers today are very inconsistent and not very eye-appealing or appetizing on the store shelf. The gluten-free breads that I have seen on the store shelf were very dry and they would crumble in your hands. This had to be improved. The flavor and eating qualities of gluten-free breads were less than desirable. Because of high water activity of gluten-free breads, mold is a major problem regarding fresh sale of gluten-free. Many gluten-free products are sold either frozen or fresh thawed, again reducing the overall quality of the product. Makeup and handling of the dough or batter must be optimized for the commercial baker. The need is apparent that the gluten-free products should be as good nutritionally as regular wheat products are today. We at Watson's, we have developed a unique combination of modified starches and gums to increase the gas retention to enhance the height and crumb structure of the product. By introducing some proprietary emulsifier blends, we have improved the overall appearance, mouthfeel, and structure of the finished product. Egg proteins are added to gluten-free products again to improve structure, flour, and palatability. We combined a special blend of baking sodas and yeast to add greater strength to the dough. We have been able to add special pre-blends of vitamins and minerals to increase the nutritional value of the gluten-free products to equal that of wheat products. We have been able to add gluten-free fiber blends to the product. We have been able to declare on our breads a good source of fiber. These gluten-free fiber blends can also be added to our entire line of gluten-free mixes. We have found that using encapsulated acids along with coated calcium propionate, we were able to extend the fresh sale life of 12 to 14 days without affecting the finished product. Gluten mixes. We have a variety of mixes available that can produce the following, and many have been commercially tested. Bread and rolls, including hams and hots, pizzas, pocket pita, tortilla, bagels, pretzels, coffee cakes, English muffins, donuts, crackers, sandwich thins, cakes, brownies, cookies, and muffins, breakfast bars, waffles, and pancakes.
Thank you, Charlie. In addition to the formulation challenges Charlie just addressed, there are added costs associated with producing gluten-free foods. Some of these will be addressed by Don when he reviews the process changes and testing requirements later in this webinar. The important thing to know here is that while there are additional costs, gluten-free foods can still be very profitable. And this is why. A study from the Celiac Disease Center at Columbia University, one of the leading centers for research of the disease, estimates that gluten-free groceries can cost about 79% more than traditional products. For example, gluten-free bread can cost $6 to $7 a loaf, and it's half the size of an average loaf of bread. The least expensive gluten-free bread we could find was $4.99 for about 14 slices. Another important fact, the gluten-free consumer expects to pay more because they know it costs more to produce gluten-free foods. When you eat healthier, you always spend more on food, but you hope that you're going to save money in the long run on healthcare costs. Left untreated, celiac disease can lead to anemia, osteoporosis, and certain cancers like lymphoma. Those with true medical needs can itemize their tax returns, and if the total medical expenses exceed 7.5% of their adjusted gross income, they can write off certain expenses, including shipping costs for ordering the food online and mileage for traveling to get the food. You can deduct the cost of the gluten-free food that is in excess of the cost of the food that you're replacing. For example, and I apologize in advance because this is going to sound a lot like one of those dreaded grammar school word problems, but if a loaf of gluten-free bread costs $6 and a comparable loaf of regular bread costs $2.50, you may include in your medical expenses the excess cost of $3.50. We have a link on our website that will give you more information on the tax deductions available. So now we're going to spend a moment talking about the latest developments in the gluten-free market, and we'll address the fad dieting question. There has been so much coverage in the media on gluten-free foods and celiac disease. Health advocates and gluten-free celebrities have been all over the news. For example, the 2011 U.S. Open champion Novak Djokovic, Chelsea Clinton with her famous gluten-free wedding cake, and TV host Elizabeth Hasselbeck have helped drive demand by raising awareness about both celiac disease and gluten sensitivity. Media mogul Oprah Winfrey and actress Gwyneth Paltrow have both talked about avoiding gluten as part of their detox diets. Shannon Ford, who's Mrs. United States 2011, was diagnosed with celiac disease 2 years ago and promotes her platform 1 in 133, raising awareness for celiac disease. National restaurants successfully offer gluten-free dining options. For example, Subway is testing gluten-free rolls and brownies in Texas and Oregon. P.F. Chang's, China Bistro, Chick-fil-A, Arby's, Olive Garden, and Ruby Tuesdays, along with hotel chains such as Fairmont, Omni, and Ritz-Carlton hotels. Grocery stores are offering gluten-free lists on their websites. Many have gluten-free sections in the grocery store or color-coded shelving and placards to help the gluten-free shopper navigate their stores. Some are now offering gluten-free private label products. Sales of gluten-free products have been booming despite the weak U.S. economy. This makes sense because when there is an economic slowdown, consumers often try dietary self-help when mainstream medical assistance feels out of their reach. I think it's also important to acknowledge that trend dieters, those who have no medical reason to be on the gluten-free diet, account for more than half the daily consumption of gluten-free products, according to the University of Maryland Center for Celiac Research. This is another reason why I suggest not looking at the total dollar sales to define this market. Instead, think of the 21 million households that have a real medical need to eat gluten-free. In this way, the trend dieters are probably good for the market at the moment because they help drive quality improvement. However, having an element of fad dieting hurts the market because some people dismiss the entire market as a fad. There are a lot of new product introductions into this market. Over a third of the products at the Summer Fancy Food Show in 2011 were positioned as low, no, or reduced allergy. The majority of these were marketed as gluten-free. Major U.S. companies are jumping into the gluten-free market. General Mills is the leader, having reformulated Chex breakfast cereals, Betty Crocker cake mixes, brownie mixes, and Bisquick pancake mix to remove the gluten. Anheuser-Busch sells gluten-free beer called Redbridge in many mainstream supermarkets. Celiac support groups. There is a comprehensive network of regional and national groups that offer their members support and education while increasing awareness. This is one of the elements of the market I find most exciting. When somebody finds a gluten-free product they like, they bring it to their group meeting and they talk about it, and the word-of-mouth marketing begins. Those who are in marketing who are listening right now know how valuable and powerful recommendations from a trusted friend can be. These groups are powerful. They also use social media to inform each other of great new products. Celiac organizations also hold gluten-free food fairs, where gluten-free foods can be sampled. There are also phone apps designed to help you find gluten-free restaurants and food options in your area. You'll find a link to one of these on our website. Gluten-free foods at major sporting events and stadiums are also making the news. One of the most important developments in the gluten-free market is the FDA labeling proposal. The FDA is revisiting the gluten-free labeling rule it first proposed in 2007. This proposal defines gluten-free to mean that the food does not contain an ingredient that is any species of wheat, rye, barley, or a hybrid of these grains, and that the final food product has less than 20 parts per million gluten. The comment period for the FDA gluten-free labeling proposal closed on October 3rd. The FDA Deputy Commissioner Michael Taylor has stated that the agency is targeting third quarter of 2012, somewhere between July and September, to issue the final gluten-free labeling standard. It is unclear at this time when the rule would actually go into effect. There will be a waiting period of sorts for the industry to come into compliance. A standard will help people with celiac disease feel more confident in the gluten-free aisle. Once the regulation goes into effect, companies seeking to label their products as gluten-free will need to comply with the requirements prescribed by the FDA. This may include specific details about when products are to be tested and the placement of the gluten-free claim on packaging, as well as the level of gluten allowed in the final product. On our website, we've included a link to the FDA website so you can read the proposal in full. It is also important to know that if a product is labeled gluten-free and is found to exceed the standard, the FDA has a number of enforcement tools it can use to protect the celiac consumer. These include issuing warning letters, civil and/or criminal penalties, seizure of products, or even recalling of mislabeled products. Don will be talking to us about some of the procedures that manufacturers need to follow to ensure products meet these standards. And with that, I'm going to pass this back to Don.
Thank you, Maura. I would like to spend a few minutes discussing producing gluten-free products in a non-dedicated facility. First, you must have a robust allergen program in place. This includes your allergenic materials being labeled and segregated, all your cleaning procedures being validated and verified, and employees being sufficiently trained. Watson is a member of the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program, also known as FARP, which is connected to the University of Nebraska. FARP is an excellent resource for developing and maintaining your allergen program. Another good idea is to wait at least 24 hours after running a product containing gluten before running the gluten-free products. Positive pressure in the production room producing gluten-free products avoids contamination from other areas in the facility that may have gluten present. You should be extremely careful to avoid any cross-contamination from such items as brushes, scoops, and operator clothing. The next slide highlights the testing that Watson performs when running gluten-free products. After cleaning the equipment, pre-operational swabs are used to monitor cleaning effectiveness. One test is the ATP hygiene test. This requires a handheld device that can be taken on the production floor. It is a 5-minute test that is simple to perform on the equipment. It should be done on the areas of the equipment that are the most difficult to clean. A second test that should be used is a test for gluten. Watson uses the Reveal 3D gluten test. It is a 10-minute test that is also very easy to perform. Before releasing any material, product testing should be performed. One test that is available is the Easy Gluten Test Kit from ELISA Technologies. This 20-minute test uses a half-gram sample of material and is also very easy to perform. In addition to in-house testing, we also send out products for third-party validation and verification testing. Both FARP and Neogen are reputable companies that can perform this type of testing. The test is sensitive to 5 parts per million gluten. There are a few certification options available. One is GFCO, the Gluten-Free Certification Organization. It's a program of the Gluten Intolerance Group. The GFCO requires that product be tested, and the requirement is less than 10 parts per million gluten. Watson has chosen GFCO for our certification. The certification process requires that a questionnaire be completed. The questionnaire covers items such as allergen procedures, your HACCP plan, your facility layout, your cleaning and testing programs, and a listing of all the ingredients that are used in the facility. A facility audit of the equipment that will be used to produce the gluten-free products is conducted under the supervision of the GFCO. OU kosher field representatives have been trained to perform the gluten-free audit. Another certification option is through CSA, the Celiac Bureau Association. This is similar to GFCO, but does not require a facility audit. In conclusion, you can produce gluten-free products in a non-dedicated facility. You just need to have a clear, thought-out plan. For more information regarding certification, links to the Gluten Intolerance Group website will be provided. Next, Moira will talk about what are the growth expectations for this market. Moira?
Great, thanks, Don. Okay, so this is the final big question that companies considering entry into the gluten-free market need to ask themselves. What are the growth expectations for this market? Packaged Facts projects that the U.S. sales of gluten-free foods and beverages will exceed $5 billion by 2015. Gluten is everywhere. It's in baked goods, pasta, beer, as well as some unexpected items like lunch meat, salad dressings, and sauces. So the potential for gluten-free products is almost unlimited. Europe is ahead of the United States when it comes to celiac disease testing and awareness. It is believed that the vast majority of people in the U.S. with celiac disease are not yet diagnosed. The Celiac Bureau Association estimates that over 90% of all celiacs have not yet been diagnosed. We will see increasing rates of diagnosis for celiac disease as well as other food allergies in the next few years. As Shelley mentioned earlier, a Mayo Clinic study published in Gastroenterology July 2009 found the rate of celiac disease has quadrupled in the last 50 years. And research at the University of Maryland School of Medicine Center for Celiac Research found evidence that cases among the elderly are increasing at a faster rate than that of the baseline population. Food allergies in general among children are becoming more prevalent over time. They've increased by 18% in the last 10 years, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Center for Health Statistics. With the rates of food sensitivities among children escalating, allergy-free foods might present a considerable opportunity among marketers of infant and children's foods. Other factors will also influence the growth of this market, such as growing awareness of these ailments among patients, healthcare practitioners, and the general public. More products and better tasting products, friends and family members eating gluten-free to support loved ones, interest from big retailers like Walmart, and the growing interest in foods that support digestive and overall health, because to a certain extent, gluten-free foods overlap these trends. The gluten-free consumer will also influence the growth of this market. One important thing to remember for grain-based producers such as a wholesale bakery is that these are totally incremental sales. They are not eating traditional baked goods now. Sales to this target population are not going to cannibalize the sales of your existing product lines. Another admirable quality of this group is their strong brand loyalty. They have tried lots of products and been burnt many times. They've gotten sick from products that were labeled gluten-free and really weren't. They've spent good money on products that they could not stand to eat. Once they find a product they like and does not make them sick, they are not going to switch brands just because another brand is on sale that week. Trust and credibility are very important to these consumers. They know they need to pay more, and they understand why. They are committed, well-educated, and want to have better access to quality food. And that completes our main presentation. Lori is going to lead us through the Q&A, but I just wanted to mention that this is the address on the web page I've been referring to throughout the presentation with those helpful links we mentioned. Lori, back to you.
Oh, thank you, Moira. We'll begin with some questions that have been submitted to our group. This specific question is for Shelley. Shelley, I recall your comment last year about the need to improve the nutritional quality of gluten-free foods. Are you seeing progress on this matter?
Yes, I am happy to report. I've done 4 editions of my book since 2001, And the first book had 1,600 products. This last edition that I just did a year ago was 3,100 products, and I now have added a chapter or an appendix of products that are enriched. And so I've seen a few people come onto the market. We've seen a couple of pastas that have been enriched with the B vitamins and iron, and some of the bread products, baked products have been enriched. So we're starting to see that. A few companies are experimenting, adding some of those alternative grains such as amaranth and flax and sorghum and buckwheat and quinoa and teff to add a bit better nutritional profile. So we are seeing some progress, but I'm sad to say that still the majority of the products are not stellar for nutrition.
Thank you. The next question is also for Shelley, and that is what sources provide the best intelligence about trends in gluten-free products?
Well, as Moira mentioned, when you look at packaged facts, it certainly gives us the Gluten-Free Beverage Report, Food and Beverage Report gives us a start. But I can't really say that there is a one specific report. I think, as Moira mentioned, you need to be looking at what's going on, where the products are being sold. I didn't talk about that today, but it's interesting. It used to be that products were only available in the health food store, and there weren't a lot to choose from, and we're seeing now a lot more available in grocery stores as well as direct from places like Amazon and gluten-free specialty internet stores. But I can't honestly say that there's a great source that would include all that information, because a lot has to do, as Moira said, about the data, because some people will put a gluten-free claim on products. I've seen in things like juices and water and things that never had gluten to start with, but because it's the latest marketing, fad, that everybody's putting gluten-free on the product. So the challenge is just to try and determine the gluten-free specialty products, because a lot of products were already naturally gluten-free. So I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but I don't have a good answer on that.
Thank you. This next question is for Charlie. What other products does Watson produce that support or supplement gluten-free products?
We now have gluten-free fibers to make a fiber claim on gluten-free baked goods. We've actually had a good source, and we achieved that. We also we have added premixes that are gluten-free to fortify gluten-free breads to equal that of wheat products. And we also have mold inhibitors to extend shelf life that are gluten-free.
The next question is for Don. When it comes to developing washdown procedures and allergen control programs, where would you recommend a bakery start?
That's a very good question. Watson has worked directly with our cleaning chemical providers in developing our washdown procedures, and when choosing areas to swab and test, we chose the most difficult areas to clean. In regards to the allergens, organizations like AIB and NSF have very strong training programs. Also, Watson is a member of FARP, and the FARP membership may be costly at first, but it can pay off. There are discounts available on assays, costs for members.
Sorry.
Laurie, excuse me, it's Shelley. I just wanted to add a few points from Don's comment. One of the things that you need to be aware of, because I still have my own private practice and I lecture all over North America to celiac groups, and something that this group is very savvy about is they're very concerned, and as are we on the medical advisory boards, of the cross-contamination issues. As you know, flour, dust flies everywhere. And so a lot of consumers are asking manufacturers where these products are being produced. Are they in dedicated facilities or shared facilities? What procedures do you take to prevent cross-contamination? Do you have separate lines or dedicated equipment? What are your testing methods, and at what level does gluten being detected at? And they're also interested in certification programs such as the Gluten-Free Certification Organization. The Canadian Celiac has just launched a new one, and the CSA and the NFCA in the state's National Foundation for Celiac Awareness has also launched certification programs. So I think that it's really important that you work with organizations that can help you, because it's not simply just get a test kit and do a few procedures. It's a very, very tricky issue, and we've had a number of gluten-free products been recalled by, certainly here in Canada, from places where they've been made, and we had some recalls in the U.S. Where they've been doing gluten-free bread on one day and running other breads on other days, and so there's a lot more to it. I'm not sure, Dawn, if you wanted to add any more.
No, nothing else.
Okay, well, the next question is also for Dawn, and that relates to the gluten assay. And with a FARP assay taking as many as 7 days to confirm gluten content, how would you suggest a wholesale bakery manage the process of releasing their products?
This question kind of ties in a little bit to that. And I mentioned earlier, Watson does test all of our blends before being released. But I would say that FARP is a very valuable resource in developing our strong allergen control program, and the assays are guaranteeing that we take the samples that the product we are releasing is less than 10 parts per million. And those tests can take 7 days, but there are other more rapid in-house assays that we would use on a day-to-day basis for release of goods.
We have a question that relates for Shelley that relates to the content of amino acids in foods. This questioner had read that the potential of products with 9 or less amino acids may be tolerated by celiacs. A German scientist, Dr. P. Kohler, has studied this, and not much else is available on this topic. Do you have any further information?
Well, we do know that the toxic fraction is a 33-mer peptide, and as I mentioned, there's some phase 2 clinical trials that are occurring right now with those endopeptidases. But I must admit, I am not familiar with Dr. Kohler's work, and so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Moira, this question is for you. Where can we find more statistics on the gluten-free market? Moira, did you...
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, that's all right. The question was, where can we find more statistics on the gluten-free market?
Sure. We have some handouts on our webpage on that link that you're seeing right now. Shelley's provided us some great handouts, too. Another report I liked is Packaged Facts, Gluten-Free Foods and Beverages. It's the 3rd edition. That's a good report. Mintel Oxygen is going to be coming up with a report in January. And those are some good places to start with, finding actual statistics.
Oh, thank you. We have another question for Shelley. She had referred early in her presentation to the prevalence of celiac disease and these conditions in families. And one of our listeners asks her to define what is meant by the term first-degree relative.
That would be your children. So if there was a family member, say my child, 10-year-old child had it, it would be all the children within the family. It would be the mother and the father. Say the mother developed celiac disease, it would be their siblings. So that's what we refer to as first degrees, where aunts and uncles would be, grandparents would be second degree.
Okay, we are down to our last 30 seconds here, and I have a question from a listener who asks whether any of the data on the 21 million households, how many people in those households may be overweight, and are these percentages similar to those that would be in the general population? And this question is for Shelley.
Well, I can tell you this much, that many of our, we do know that people with celiac disease can actually be obese prior to getting diagnosed. We used to think that you had to be underweight and losing weight and having diarrhea, but we have seen cases, a third of the cases where they are actually constipated, and we have seen a number of cases where they're obese prior to getting diagnosed. For those that were not overweight or obese prior to getting diagnosed, if you go to any of the celiac support group meetings that I attend all over North America, you do see, and I'm getting many, many questions all the time on my blogs and emails, is that people are gaining weight, and they're gaining lots of it, because you compare the nutritional composition of, say, a gluten-free bread to regular gluten-containing bread. Sometimes they're 1.5 to 2 times the calories, twice as much fat, a lot more sugar, and not much fiber, so they're not very satisfying. So people tend to eat a lot more of the gluten-free products And so, therefore, we're seeing people gain a lot of weight. So that is a huge issue that we are trying to address, is helping people lose weight on the gluten-free diet. So it's quite ironic that people are saying go gluten-free for a weight loss diet, because a lot of the people that I see, a good chunk of them are actually gaining weight and too much of it. So we need to look at products that have more satiety, more fiber, more nutrition, and certainly less fat, sugar, and calories.
Well, we have reached the end of our hour, but I'll allow one more question, and that is also to Shelley, and that is, does a product need to be 100% gluten-free for a person with celiac disease not to have a reaction?
Very good question. We do know there's two groups of people with celiac disease. We have responders that with just even small amounts of gluten can be developing symptoms within 2 to 4 hours. Sometimes it can be delayed 1 or 2 days later. Then we have other people that are actually can consume gluten and not realize it inadvertently, or maybe not follow the diet and cheat if you want, and have no symptoms outwardly, but there is still damage happening at the gut. Now, we did not have time today to talk about it, but I do have some slides where I talk about gluten thresholds by Dr. Katassi, who looked at a study where they gave people with well-controlled celiac disease either no gluten as a placebo. They gave them 10 milligrams or 50 milligrams of gluten per day for 3 months. They did their celiac blood tests and the intestinal biopsy at baseline. They were making sure they were following a strict gluten-free diet. And at the end of the 3 months, those that got 50 milligrams of gluten per day had changes in the villus atrophy and the villus structure. There was patients that were getting as little as 10 milligrams of gluten per day that were, in fact, became symptomatic. So that is why that study that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Dr. Carlo Katassi, Catassi, I have links to that if you want to get it from my website. That study has been our premier study to look at that low levels of gluten can cause problems, and that's why we recommend, and that's why the Codex has gone with 20 parts per million. Canada is looking at using 20 parts per million as their threshold, as well as the proposed FDA gluten-free regulation. So I think that the key is that you're aiming for no detectable gluten using an R5 type ELISA test. So that is what you want to aim for, no detectable gluten if at all possible.
Well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time, and that concludes today's presentation. We hope you found it informative. If we didn't get to your question, representatives from Watson will be answering them individually. And questions that came up frequently will be answered at the Watson website that is on your screen right now, which is watsoninc.com/gfinfo, PHP. On behalf of Baking and Snack, Milling and Baking News, Food Business News, and Watson Inc., I'd like to thank everyone for your time and attendance this afternoon. We hope you will return here for future webinars from Southland Publishing. Please enjoy the rest of your day.